Good morning. Welcome to the final presentation of the 2020 Season 4 Lifelong Learners of the Central Coast. We want to thank you for your continued support throughout the trying year. With the positive news represented by the new vaccines, we hope to return to some form of normalcy in the coming year. And speaking of normalcy, it's not normalcy for us to begin 1.5 hours late. The presenter and I have been talking about this, trying to put the necessary blame where it belongs, and we're just going to put it on the pebble of the mountain of 2020 and all the problems that have been presented this year. We normally try to start promptly right on the time. So without ado, we will present our speaker. It's Dr. Wendell Stephenson. He's a president emeritus of the Final Exit Network and a member of their advisory board. He taught philosophy at various colleges and universities for about 45 years. And he's now retired from Fresno City College, where he taught ethics, philosophy, religion, social and political philosophy, and critical reasoning. Dr. Stephenson would like to establish, oh, by the way, he likes to be called Wendell. He wants to establish a clinic in Fresno devoted to informing folks about the California law, allowing physician-assisted death and enabling them to easily access information to end their lives on their own terms. His presentation today is titled Final Exit. We will be taking questions from time to time. He likes to take them within the presentation. You have to wait till the end. In order to do that, you want to use the chat feature there on your control. You can type in your questions there. Address Dr. Stephenson as the person to answer your questions. He may do that solely. If not,
They started a half hour late.
Service to go between.
Can you imagine how many people like you just gave up?
I will shut down the audio.
Let you in and saying we're late. Starting with
Dr. Stephenson.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Okay, now.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, hi, and I definitely prefer to be called Wendell. So if you're going to ask me a question, refer to me as Wendell. I did earn a Ph.D. A bazillion years ago at UC Santa Barbara, but I've never used the honorific doctor. So are they all seeing the screen, Ed?
They should be, yes.
Okay, so you're seeing Benedict Spinoza, a Dutch philosopher from the 17th century. I don't know a terrible amount about Spinoza, but I have read that he was, especially for his time, a very humane, good, and free-thinking individual. And his philosophy is studied to this day. So although I haven't studied it particularly, other people have. I put him up there because I've got a great quote from him in a couple slides from now. But the next slide, Ed, if you can put that up. Whoops, no, go back to that one, Stephenson. So Spinoza is up there, famous philosopher. Stephenson, I'm talking. I left it blank on the thought, you don't need a photo of me, you can see me, I hope. And let's go now to the next slide. So the great quote from Spinoza is, a free man thinks of nothing less than of death, and his wisdom is a meditation not on death, but on life. To which I say, yes, but a free human being thinks on death enough to ensure, as much as humanly possible, a good death. So what I want to talk about today then is ensuring a good death as much as is humanly possible. And of course, the humanly possible is an important qualification or caveat, and we'll be talking a bit about that. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm representing Final Exit Network today. Many of you may not know about it, and I'll be saying more about it in slides that follow. I will say here that I learned about Final Exit Network, roughly speaking, back in 2004. I had been working with Compassion and Choices, which we can also talk about. And we had started a local group here in Fresno of Compassion and Choices. And we were holding the occasional meeting and what have you. And I don't remember how, but I heard about Final Exit Network and I inquired about it. And it turns out that they were more active in the way that I wanted to be than Compassion and Choices was.
Is this bothering you? No, okay.
Compassion and Choices was engaged in trying to change the law in California and elsewhere. And I favored that and I was keen on that. But Final Exit Network focused on working with people who wanted to end their lives now. And they would give them advice and counsel, and they would offer to be present with them when they ended their lives. And that appealed to me. It seemed more activist and it seemed more now, as it were. So I volunteered for Final Exit Network. I became what they call an exit guide. And then eventually I joined the board of trustees in about 2009. And soon thereafter, I was elected to be the president of Final Exit Network. And I served for 4 years as president, I think till about 2014, when I was elected to be president of the Academic Senate at Fresno City College, and I resigned from Final Exit in order to do that. So that's a little bit about my background. I will say more about Final Exit Network now, if we can go to the next slide, Ed. So there you see our vision and our mission. And if you read the vision, any competent person unbearably suffering an intractable medical condition has the option to die legally and peacefully. So a vision is a hope or projection or a wish for what will be the case at some time. I'm sure that all of you know that this vision has not been realized.
Oh, that's your guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hearing some folks talking, I'm not sure. There's a variety of ways in which this has not been realized. One is that, as many of you probably know, only about 7 states in the nation have passed a California or an Oregon style law. So most people in the United States do not have access to the drugs that doctors are allowed to prescribe in states that have the law. They don't have access. They don't have legal access to those. So they can't avail themselves of an option to die legally and peacefully under those types of laws. But there are other problems. It's not just that there aren't laws that allow it in most states. There are drawbacks to the law. And I'll be wanting to talk about those, but right now, maybe I'll say that one from the point of view of Final Exit Network people and myself, one big drawback to the laws is that they require that one be terminal. And terminal is defined as having 6 months or less to live. And one may well be suffering from an intractable medical condition, but no doctor is willing to declare that one only has 6 months left to live. Doctors, I understand, are often loath to try to play prophet and say when, I might die or when I might not die. And many conditions are very hard to predict. One doesn't know. We'll talk a bit about that later. So it is not the case that our vision has been realized, and many would say that it's not even close to being realized. I would say it's probably a little closer now than it was when I first got involved in the Right to Die movement back in the 80s, as it were. If you take a look at our mission now, to educate qualified individuals in practical, peaceful ways to end their lives, offer a compassionate bedside presence, and defend their right to choose. One might raise the question, what's a qualified individual? One might also wonder, and what sort of practical, peaceful ways do you have in mind? I will say a little bit about qualified individuals. Final Exit Network has criteria that a person has to meet before they're allowed to come into the Exit Guide program. These criteria include the obvious, that the person has to be judged mentally competent. But the other really important one is that the person has to verify and document that he or she suffers from a medical condition that is what the vision says up there. It's an intractable medical condition that makes their life, in their view, unbearable. And they are evaluated by a medical team to see whether they meet that condition. So those would be the qualified individuals. They have to be adults. And then the practical, peaceful ways to end their lives. I'm not going to say much about this. One might well wonder what they are, however. And so I'm going to say a little bit about it. I may be able to answer, some questions about it if people have them. So the way you end your life under the California law, many of you may know about this, a doctor is allowed to prescribe a cocktail, you kind of have to follow a sequence of ingestions, something like 3 to 4 steps involved in the process. And the final step, that when you ingest the final product, it will kill you. And that is a relatively peaceful method. We have a lot of experience with it, and people do die peacefully. Not exactly quickly, and it varies a lot depending on the individual. I believe I've read that the average time to death is something like 2 hours after the ingestion of the final product. So it's a relatively peaceful method. It's just not particularly quick. And that's only available to people who qualify under the laws that exist in the various states, California, Oregon, Washington, and we'll talk a bit more about where those states are. There are other methods, and Final Exit teaches about these other methods. Two main ones have emerged over the course of the years. One is called the inert gas method, which uses either helium or nitrogen and a plastic bag. And that's all I'm going to say about that, except to say that it is extremely quick. It is extremely lethal, and it is completely painless and effective. If people have questions, I can try to answer more of them, but I don't like to say too much about the methods. The other method that is coming into the fore is called, well, it's a lethal salt, sodium nitrite. It's readily available, and if you take it in the proper dose before, you need to ingest a anti-nausea medication first, but if you take it in the proper dose, it is lethal. And a number of people around the world have ended their lives with that method. It's very peaceful. It's quite quick. It's not as quick as the inert gas method, but it is effective. Those are the two methods that Final Exit Network will teach about. The compassionate presence at the bedside. We offer, the guides tell people who qualify for our services that if you would like us to be present when you die, we are willing to do that. We try to, as much as we can in the short amount of time that we spend with people, to make friends with them and to get to know their family and their friends that they want us to get to know, and you know, be a friend to them. And if they want us to be there, we will be there. And most people that qualify for our services do want us to be there. They find it comforting, reassuring, and so we are there. We are the only organization in the United States that offers that compassionate bedside presence on a consistent basis. And it's one of the main services that we provide to folks. Okay, the next slide. All right, so the whole idea is to try to have a good death. That's what I started with today. Spinoza says a free man won't think much about death, think very little about death. And that may well be true, as I said, but a free man, a free woman, a free human being, I think, needs to think enough about death so that they can ensure a good death, if that's, you know, insofar as that's humanly possible. It's not, we all know, if we think about it, it's not within human ability to absolutely ensure a good death, because one can be struck without, you know, any warning with some kind of horrible disease. I will mention that I myself, not long after I retired from my job, about 1.5 years ago, and this was one of my worst nightmares, I was diagnosed with a lethal kidney disease out of the blue. I was perfectly healthy. I was very active, you know, riding my bike everywhere, playing squash or pickleball. And all of a sudden I'm in the hospital and they're telling me that my kidneys are functioning at something like 23, 24%. And that if they can't turn it around, I'm going to die. Whoa. So there I am, you know. Now, that's one example. There are so many that we could talk about, that we can think about, where you could be struck and you wouldn't experience what you consider to be a good death. Luckily, in my case, they have a treatment, and they've given it to me, and it seems to have worked. And last report I got from the doctor, I was doing really quite well, just about as well as anybody my age is doing in terms of kidney function and other functions. So there's much that we can't control, but there's a whole lot that we can. But it requires thought. It requires planning. And we can go to the next slide now. Yeah, I went one too far there. No, you didn't. I'm sorry. You were right to start with. What is a good death? We could spend a lot of time talking about this, of course. And in the slide there, you see that death with dignity, and it's a gentle and a painless death. You could add various things. Swift comes to mind. I mentioned that the inert gas method is very swift. To my knowledge, it's the swiftest death of a peaceful kind that we know about. Unconsciousness occurs about 30 seconds after one inhales the gas, and brain death ensues about 5 minutes in typical cases. So it's extremely quick. One might wonder about this method and how it was developed. And in fact, it comes out of the Hemlock Society, which I'm going to talk briefly about in a little bit. They commissioned some researchers to look into various peaceful methods for ending one's life. And they came up with this method, and the researchers actually tried it out. They volunteered. One would put the bag on and turn the gas on and become unconscious. And then his partner would, he hoped, take the bag off once he saw he was unconscious. And they did this twice. And in each case, the person who went under reported that there was no pain whatsoever. There was no sensation. There was no sensation of suffocating. One person said that he felt a little bit the way he feels after he has one cocktail, just slightly on the tipsy side, which, if you're like me, that feels good if you've experienced that. So one might say, well, it ought to be swift, right? But there's another feature that Final Exit has really emphasized, and the researchers that have worked for Final Exit, and that is that it posed no risk to others who might be present or who might wish to be present. And there are many methods that one can think of that do pose a risk to others. For example, as you all know, you could kill yourself with carbon monoxide. So you could, bring a charcoal burning wood pit or something into your closed room and inhale carbon monoxide, and you would die. But people who might discover you, or people who would want to be present, let's say, would also die. And one doesn't want that, obviously. So you have to find a method that poses no risk to others. Also, you would like to have a method that doesn't appear to be grisly or gruesome to any persons who are with you. One serious drawback to shooting oneself, which everybody thinks of, and in fact, it's the most common way for people to commit suicide in the United States, is to, get a gun and shoot yourself through the head or through the heart or something like that. But, if you think about it, that's pretty messy and not pleasant for people who might discover you or people who might be near you or whatever. Not to mention that it is very often ineffective. Years ago, I volunteered to be on a committee that oversaw animal welfare up in Oregon. And the doctors involved in the projects up there were researchers. Often they were PhDs as well as MDs. And they were considering a proposal by a person to study skin grafting. And it was a novel technique. I don't remember the details of it now. And the fellow who was submitting the proposal had some slides. And one of them, I think two of them, as a matter of fact, showed a young boy, I think a teenager, who had tried to end his life with a shotgun. And he had put the shotgun between his feet and pointed it at his head and pulled the trigger. And what he had succeeded in doing was blowing his face off. He had not succeeded in killing himself. You might think, well, how could that possibly be? But there it was. And I will tell you that the doctors who were looking at that slide could not continue looking at it. They looked away. It was so horrible. It was so awful. For some reason, I'm pretty squeamish. I was able to continue looking at it. And, to this day, I remember it. So gun deaths are, in general, horrible deaths and very bad for the people who might want to be there or who would discover your body or something like that. So various criteria that one might put into the good death category. I've just mentioned a couple. There are no doubt many others. Let's go to the next slide. It's just an example I gave of what I consider to be a bad death. People could differ on this, no doubt, but that's not something I want right there. My grandmother looked sort of like that when she finally died. And she spent a lot of time moaning and what have you. And the doctor said, well, she's not in pain. And I said, well, she's moaning, how do we know she's not in pain? And I said, I think you ought to give her more pain medication to make sure that she's not. And we can talk about that because some doctors are very hesitant to giving pain medication because it runs the risk of ending the person's life. One question that a philosopher always is interested in, philosophers have been interested in this since at least Plato's time, was, well, what about not dying at all? Wouldn't that be cool? What about, prolonging one's life into the indefinite future? And let's show the next slide, Ed. I mean, in the abstract, living way past when we do sounds great. And speaking personally, I would love to live a lot longer than I'm likely to live. But of course, there's the caveat that we often don't think about. And that is, of course, I want to be healthy. I want to be strong. I want to have, all my senses the way I do now. I want to be able to see. I want to be able to taste. I want to be able to talk. I want to be able to hear, and so on and so forth. Well, some of you probably know Jonathan Swift and his famous Gulliver's Travels. I reread Gulliver's Travels maybe once every 5 years or so because I love it so much. It's such a great satire on human beings and human life and human ambition and pride. And in one of the vignettes in Gulliver's Travels, I think it's in the third book, the third set of travels, Gulliver winds up with the Struldbrugs in Lugnag. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Gulliver, when he first hears about these folks, he's told, these folks are immortal. They can't die. And Gulliver never heard of such a thing. And he thinks he's overjoyed. He says, "Oh, I've got to talk to these folks. I've got to meet them. Must be wonderful. Oh, I could talk to a fellow who lived during Roman times, and I could ask him what he remembers about the emperors, and what it was like to be in Rome when Nero burned it down and played all day." And so he's really looking forward to seeing these folks, and his hosts are looking at him like, you're really crazy, because when he finds them, what he finds is people who have lost everything. They've lost the ability to see, they've lost the ability to hear, they can't read anymore because they can't remember the beginning of the sentence when they started it to the end, and they're reduced to beggary. It's a horrible existence. And when I read that years and years ago, I thought, boy, he really nailed that one, right? One does not want to live as a human being past the time when one has lost all one's senses and what have you. And that differs for people as to how long they've got being able to enjoy their lives. All right, let's do a little bit of history. And I'm not seeing, I see a chat. I see one in there, but I'm not sure that,
There's no question yet, Doctor.
Okay. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat room, and make any comments you want. I thought I would let's see. I'm not seeing the screen now. Did I do something?
Other people can see the screen. You can continue.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Just a little bit about the history then of Final Exit Network. Derek Humphrey, along with a few other folks, founded what he called the Hemlock Society back in 1980s. I'm not sure it was exactly 1980, but it was in that era. He started it in Oregon. I think he'd been living in Southern California. He started it, and I don't know who was associated with him back in those days. I do know that eventually some really wonderful people joined in with Derek Humphrey, not nearly as well known as Derek is. One is Dr. Richard, his name is slipping me right now. Let me see if I got it in my notes. McDonald, Dr. Richard McDonald, and the other person that joined with him eventually is Fay Gersh. Fay is fairly well known, but again, neither one of those is nearly as well known as Derek Humphrey, who maybe is the most famous right to die advocate in the United States. Not as famous as Dr. Kevorkian was, I think, when Kevorkian was alive and doing his work, but maybe close. Derek is, next slide, Derek is famous for his book, Final Exit, which some of you may know about. It's readily available. It's available in most libraries across the United States. You can get it online. You can get it through Amazon. It's a how-to book. And amazingly, and this amazed Derek, it very soon became a bestseller after he published it. And I can't remember exactly when he published it. It was back in the 90s, I believe. And it continued on the bestseller list for a very long time and continues to sell well. And it's been translated, I can't remember into how many different languages. It's a very good book. It's very clearly written. And it gives you everything you might want to know. It tells you what not to do if you want to end your life in a peaceful way, and it tells you what to do. It, however, is not the best source out there on what Derek calls self-deliverance. Not everyone is happy with that term self-deliverance, but that's the term he uses in his book. The very best source that is out there and available to anybody is called the Peaceful Pill Handbook. It's available online. You just Google Peaceful Pill Handbook and it'll come up. It's produced by Philip Nitschke, who is an Australian doctor, very famous in Australia as an advocate of the right to die. He's been on the cutting edge of death with dignity movement for a very long time. He has some notoriety in some circles. He's sort of like Dr. Kevorkian, except that he does not practice, he does not assist in suicides as Dr. Kevorkian did. But he gives all the latest up-to-date information, including information about the use of sodium nitrite, what are called lethal salts. Whenever I have any sort of question or conundrum about ending one's life, I go to the Peaceful Pill Handbook, which again is available online and is available through Amazon.
Wendell, we have a question from Judith.
Very good. Let's entertain it.
For many older people, the fear of Alzheimer's is primary, but with the mental competence part of the law, I'm wondering if in the early stages, one can still qualify for ending one's life.
Yeah, my understanding is that one can in the early stages, as was specified. As most people know, probably, especially people our age, Alzheimer's is extremely hard to predict. And you can you can be diagnosed with it and hardly anybody, maybe not even yourself, hardly anybody knows that you have Alzheimer's. And then, you can become progressively less capable, less competent. And Final Exit Network will work with Alzheimer's patients but they have to be competent. So we always talk about the window of opportunity, which is the window, where you're competent and you can know what you're doing and you can say you want to do it and know exactly how to do it and so on. And we've worked with many Alzheimer's patients. Now, unfortunately, Alzheimer's is one of those diseases where you would likely not qualify, you would not qualify under the California law because no doctor would be willing to say that you have 6 months or less to live. I don't know how long people can live with Alzheimer's, but I understand it can be a very long time. And as we know, there are many facilities that are filled with Alzheimer's patients and very old people who probably don't want to be where they are, but in many cases, maybe they don't know where they are and they don't know from what they suffer. So it's a good question. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. Final Exit Network is wrestling with it. We've come up with a directive that people can fill out, sign, in an attempt to enable them to ensure a good death, even as they suffer progressively from the
And there's a comment and a question. I'm trusting God to help me fulfill the length of my days on this earth. Heaven will be my eternal home. That is why I do not fear death, because of this hope I have. Do you have this peace?
I'm not going to answer that directly, okay? What we try scrupulously to serve folks, irrespective of whether they have religious belief or whether they don't. And we don't inquire into it. We are tolerant and welcoming to anybody and anyone, irrespective of their religious beliefs and stuff. And I prefer not to talk about mine, again, because, it's kind of a private thing. I don't want to go Trumpian on you here, by the way. Trump was asked what his favorite scriptures in the Bible were. And he said, well, that's private. I don't want to reveal what my favorite scriptures are. I would certainly do that. I would reveal what my favorite scriptures are if I could remember them. Let's see, the next slide tells us about the history of the Hemlock Society. So one of the problems that fringe groups have, and Final Exit Network has a fringe group, Compassion and Choices, which is a lot larger, is also a fringe group, where fringe just means that, just aren't very many folks that are members of that society and that, support it and so on. I'm a member of a fringe political group. I lean towards libertarianism, and I think the libertarians got maybe close to 1% of the national vote for president. They ran a candidate. Some of you may not even know that. Very good candidate, I thought. And get about 1% of the vote. And the problem that fringe groups often have is staying unified. And libertarians, almost by definition, have a problem with staying unified. I mean, it's difficult for them to even agree that we should have a government, let alone what exactly the government should do or preferably should not do. So there have been splits in the Right to Die movement in the United States, and the most famous one occurred with the Hemlock Society, which, as I mentioned, Derek Humphreys founded in the 80s, and then in the early 2000s, it split into two main groups. One is Compassion and Choices, and the other is us, Final Exit Network. Compassion and Choices focuses almost exclusively on trying to get Oregon-style, California-style laws passed. And they will work to some degree with individual people, but that's not their focus. Final Exit Network pays no attention in general to passing laws, although we favor passing better laws. But we focus almost exclusively on individuals and giving them information, and offering a compassionate presence at their bedside should they choose to end their lives. All right, the next slide. How do we die? Well, the statistics there are pretty revealing. Most people die in the hospital and in the intensive care unit or acute care hospitals. 20% in nursing homes and only 20% at home, whereas most people say they prefer to die at home. So this, again, to go back to the start of the presentation, is why people have to give some thought to death, because otherwise they'll be like most people in America are, despite what they wish, which is to die at home. They don't. That slide sort of speaks for itself, I think. Let's go to the next one now. How should we die? I've said quite a lot about this already, so I won't say any more right now about it. Well, every now and then we have to have a cartoon, right? Who's right to choose? This cartoon reminds me of a friend of mine who is still a friend. I had written an op-ed piece for the local newspaper, Fresno Bee it's called, and he had read it and he was a bit shocked by it. My friend is a strong traditional Catholic. And he wanted to talk to me about it. And I said, sure, okay. And he said, you know, really, if somebody gets sick and you know, and starts to suffer and what have you, well, then they should just continue to suffer. They shouldn't be allowed to end their lives. That's wrong. And so I looked at him and I said, so what you're telling me is that you would force me to stay alive, even though I wanted to die, and even though I told you that I was suffering in a horrible way. And I find that, makes me angry, right? That somebody would actually use the law to force me to stay alive when I'm suffering irreparably, and there's nothing that the doctors can do for me. I will say maybe a little bit about pain medication and what have you later, but somebody might want to ask a question about it. I'm seeing from Janine here, I only find the Peaceful Pill Handbook. Is that the one you mean? Yeah, that's the one I mean. There's a version online. You can actually access it online. I believe Philip charges for a subscription to his online outfit, but you can get it through Amazon too. Are we on the slide? Yeah, I think we're on the slide that says that 7 in 10 Americans support physician-assisted dying laws. That's one way to refer to them. Some people call the laws MAID, medical assisted aid in dying, medically assisted aid in dying. That's what the California law is often called. So there's varieties of terminology. Now, when you look at a slide like that, you think, wow, 70% of Americans? Is that across the United States? And as far as I know, it is. The poll is a national poll. So it's not just that 70% in California support it or 70% in New York, but 70%, you know, roughly speaking, in Iowa do also. That's my understanding. Now, I don't know that they've done individual state polls. If they have done, I've never seen them. So I can't really say that, for example, 70% of Iowans support PAD laws. But let's suppose that they do. The question that might occur to somebody is then, well, why are there only 7 states in the United States that have these laws? Why is that? And somebody might know in the audience why that is, especially a person would know if that person has followed California's attempt to pass a assisted dying law in California. I'd be interested if anybody has followed that or has been involved in it. I don't know the exact history of the attempts in California, but I do know that when I moved back here from Oregon in 1999, there was soon an attempt in the California legislature to pass a PAD law. And I do know that a ballot initiative was put forward in California to pass a PAD law. And that ballot initiative lost, not by a large margin, but it lost. And the question arises, well, how could that be if 70% of Americans and 70% in the state of California support that law? And I think there are a number of answers. One answer is, as we all know, many people don't vote. In fact, in many elections, most people don't vote. So it's the voters that determine, you know, whether a law will be passed or not. Whereas the polls are just polling individuals, right? Not necessarily voters, and polls that try to get at, you know, what voters are going to do are dodgy, as we all know from the last 2 elections, presidential elections. It's very hard to know who really is going to vote. Even if people say they're going to, maybe they don't. And even if they have in the past, maybe they won't in the future. So very, lots of questions here. Another issue is that this issue tends to be quite divisive. And there are people who are very strongly opposed to PAD laws. And those people come out and vote. Those people often belong to organizations that strongly oppose PAD laws, and they give a lot of money to try to prevent those laws from being passed. So,
and Wendell, there's the fiscal side to this. Jana makes a point in the chat room.
Is that doctors, pharmaceuticals want to make big money?
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure they do. For that matter, I'd like to make big money. But I assume maybe what's being got at there is people, people not having laws because it would mean maybe less people going to emergency rooms, less people going to the hospitals, and so on. I think I've read that the bulk of medical costs are incurred by people in the last 6 months of their lives. So that, maybe until the last 6 months of your life, you hardly, your burden on the medical system was minimal. But towards the end, it becomes maximal. And yeah, people make a lot of money because of that, for sure. So there's only 7 states in the union that have PAD laws, and they're pointed out on the map there. District of Columbia recently passed a PAD law, but of course it's not a state, so it's 7 states and the District of Columbia. Doctors, it turns out, want to die peacefully and quickly also. And I was really struck by this particular graph here as to what they don't want. And if you look at that, you see that they don't want a whole lot of stuff that is pretty common in medicine. The only thing that they tend to want is pain medicine, pain medication for whatever condition they have. I was pretty amazed by that. But when you think about it, I think you can understand it. Depends on maybe what they suffer from, what their condition is. Excuse me. We could talk a little bit about pain medication. And we could talk about terminal sedation. Maybe that'll come up a bit later. I see that Rick has made a point here. Strongly believe that an individual should be able to decide the definition of his or her quality of life. That's exactly what Final Exit Network believes, by the way. It is possible to come to the conclusion that you no longer wish to live because there's no longer any joy in your life. It's about personal choice. Yes, and this is being debated and discussed quite a lot in Right to Die organizations, especially in England, but also in Final Exit Network. We do not work with people who are not verifiably diagnosed with a lethal condition. Doesn't have to fit the definition of terminal, but it has to be lethal. It eventually will kill you. So Alzheimer's qualifies, for example. But we don't currently work with people who simply say, I no longer get any joy from life. And I believe I've lived all the years that I want to live, and I want to die, and I'm ready to die. We don't work with people like that. However, we will direct those people to the various sources. For example, Derek Humphrey's book, Philip Nitschke's book, where they can learn about how to end their lives in a peaceful, painless, swift non-gruesome manner. Final Exit Network supports people's personal choice in these matters. But they're very tricky, and they're very difficult because one of the things we emphasize in our work is that we want the folks that we work with to talk to their family members, to talk to their loved ones, and as much as is humanly possible to enable their loved ones to feel good about their choice, or at least not to feel devastated by it, to understand it. We think that's very important. And so in the case of somebody who just has lost joy in life, one problem, there's many problems there, but one problem would be simply, my wife would not like to hear from me that I've lost joy in life, right? She would say, what about me? And yeah, exactly, right? Not to say that, I wouldn't just have to tell her, if I was able, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I just don't, the thrill is gone. Well, I wouldn't put it that way, but you know what I'm getting at. Let's move from that slide, because I think I'm taking quite a long time here. Let's move to the next slide. So these are conditions where these are conditions where you might feel like your suffering is intolerable. And we've listed just a few there in the slide: Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and so on. I came across one the other day that I'd never heard of, which is very frightening. It's called progressive palsy. It's an uncommon disorder that's much like Lou Gehrig's disease, apparently, but it's worse. And that should be up there, but lots of things could be put up there. Those are just examples. And we will work with all those folks. The Final Exit Network will, whereas many of those folks would not qualify for the California law. So the main drawback from our point of view, from my point of view, to the California law, to the Oregon style law, is the terminal condition. There's so many things you can suffer from that are not going to kill you in 6 months. I had a friend here in Fresno who was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And the first thing he looked around for was a legal way to end his life, and talked to me about it. And I said, well, we don't have a California law, and there's no very good way to get the medications you would need to end your life. And there's no doctor who can legally help you. So, and he was aghast. He couldn't believe it. I said, yeah, that's it. That's the way it is. Now, there are ways to end your life, and I can put you onto the organization that would enable you to find out and work with you. But he wanted a legal way, a doctor assisted way. And at the time that I knew him and was talking to him, there was no such way. Okay, I've got many people outlive all relatives and many friends. That's contributing to a lesser quality of life on top of the physical limitations. Yeah, you're exactly right. And this is from Rick. And I've known people like this. And yeah, it's really a horrible condition to be in. I knew a man who was a professor at UC Santa Barbara that I knew quite well. I used to share an office with him. And he would tell people when they would see them, I don't have any reason to live, and I don't want to continue to live. And he was depressed, and he was not fun to be around, as you might imagine. But apparently he didn't know. And since he never talked to me about this, I never, suggested to him that there were ways to end his life if he wanted to do that. Apparently he didn't know about that, or maybe he didn't want to do it. I don't know. I didn't talk to him about it, but yeah, I fully sympathize with such folks, and especially when, you know, their relatives are no longer with them and they don't have friends anymore. Then you don't have to worry about the effect on friends and relatives, which in general you do. Yes, the question comes in from Candace. Is your organization able to legally help someone who is fatal but not terminal? Absolutely. That's the main thing we do. We actually don't work much with people who are diagnosed as terminal. We do some. In some cases, our clients are in hospice. So we do that. But for the most part, the folks we work with are suffering from a fatal condition, but they cannot get a diagnosis of terminality because, as I said already, doctors are loath to give that. And by the way, one of the arguments that opponents of Ph.D. laws have used, I think effectively, in various states that have tried to pass those laws is precisely over this terminality condition. They will say, oh, I've known people who were declared terminal and they lived another 5 years and they had a good life and so on. Yeah, absolutely. Supporters of those laws absolutely agree. We don't like the terminality condition. We understand why it's there, but we don't like it, and it's horrible. It means that a whole lot of folks cannot access the PAD laws or the MAID laws. And there's nowhere to go in the United States. Maybe I'll go to, so there's Final Exit Network, and maybe I should just say that I hope you all know that it is perfectly legal to end your own life. There's no law against suicide. There used to be a law against suicide, go back far enough, in every state in the union. But those laws have been repealed, and it's not against the criminal law to end your life. Now, there is this caveat, and it's a very important caveat. The state, I believe this is true in all states, the state has the authority to arrest you and apprehend you and incarcerate you for a certain amount of time if they judge that you are a danger to yourself or to others. And if you let it be known that you are considering ending your life, it doesn't matter what condition you're in, the state has the authority, and they often exercise it, to arrest you and put you in jail. And I can't remember, they can hold you for up to 48 hours or maybe longer. I can't remember. There's some restriction on how long they can hold you. But if they continue to think that you are a danger to yourself, then they hold you indefinitely. So there is that caveat, and it's a very important caveat, and it's one reason why Final Exit Network is very careful in working with people to try to ensure that nobody who would use the knowledge against them knows that they're going to end their lives, or that they're planning to end their lives. To my knowledge, we haven't had a case where we've worked with a client where the authorities found out and then apprehended the person, but it certainly can happen, and you have to be very careful about it. Okay, so now let's go to the next slide, where I say there are 4 steps to end-of-life planning. It's got a hand there. And I'm going to quickly go through the 4 steps. The next slide speaks to the living will. Everybody ought to have one of these. You specify, what you want, what you don't want. If you were in certain circumstances, you would not want this, you would not want that, this, that, and the other thing. You can put your wishes down there in that will. And that's a very important document to have. You ought to have it in your health records. You ought to show it to your doctor. And that's one important document. Again, that requires some thought, right? That's why although Spinoza's right, we don't want to think a lot about death. We need to think enough about death. The next item that you must have is the durable power of attorney. And this is where you designate someone to make healthcare decisions for you. You want to designate someone you thoroughly trust, who knows your wishes and who is bound and determined to carry them out. A lot of pressure can be brought on a person who has the durable power of attorney. So I made my wife my durable power of attorney because I know she's got the guts to ensure that my wishes are carried out as specified in the living will and as specified by my many conversations with her over the years. I've also had conversations with my children. I have a very young grandchild, so I haven't had a conversation with him yet, but at the appropriate time, I certainly would have a conversation with him. The more friends and loved ones one has that know what one's wishes are, the better chances one has of that durable power of attorney being able to be successful. The next slide is something that I didn't realize was important until a few years ago, and where Derek Humphrey emphasized it. And I said, yeah, I come to think of it, that's kind of important. Talk to your doctor. Ask your doctor, if it came to it, would you help me with the California law? Let's say, would you be willing to prescribe the appropriate medications? In my case, I asked my doctor, this is before the California law, would you be willing to prescribe a lethal dose of medication, even though it's not legal? And he said yes. The first doctor I asked this question said no. I was against his religion and his personal ethical belief. And I said, okay, thank you very much. I'll find another doctor. And I found this current doctor, and he said yes. Now he doesn't have to go against the law if I am declared terminal, which I think I could be because of my underlying kidney condition. All right, the fourth step is to learn how to end one's life peacefully and painlessly and swiftly. On the right-hand side, you will see this. I think she's still on YouTube. I can't remember her name now. I think she's an Australian woman who created a YouTube video in which she demonstrates the use of the inert gas method. And I think she makes the hood on the video and what have you. It's kind of funny, actually, to watch her. All right. This take action slide, I think I've gone through most of this. I need to make it a little bit bigger for myself. So, oh no, I'll make it smaller, actually. You can see it. I think I've gone through most of this. It says join and support the organizations fighting for your right to die with dignity. Yeah. I hope that you will consider joining Final Exit Network. Consider joining Compassion and Choices. As I said already, Compassion and Choices tries to change the laws, tries to get Oregon-style laws on the books, California-style laws, whereas we work directly with clients, but we also advocate for better laws. You can go to finalexitnetwork.org. That's our website, and you can join there. You can join. I sent Michael Klinger a brochure from Final Exit Network, and maybe that can be circulated to people, and you could use that to join. But maybe the simplest way is to go to the website, finalexitnetwork.org. We are entirely supported by donations, members' donations. We have no other way of doing our work than the support of people who are dedicated to this cause and want to help out. And most of these people who support us, of course, are not themselves suffering from an irreversible lethal condition. They're healthy, they're perfectly fine, they're enjoying their lives, but they support us nonetheless. It's very much like, I support NAMI, National Association for the Mentally Ill. It's not because I'm mentally ill. It's not because I have a loved one or a friend that's mentally ill. It's because I have compassion for folks who suffer from mental illness. And I want to support an organization that tries to support them. So that's the reason why most people support Final Exit Network and other Right to Die organizations. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, your advance directive, that's also sometimes just called the living will. And I've already described the living will, so I think we're good to go on that. Next slide. We can skip that one because I've talked about it. Do not resuscitate. This, in my understanding, is not really necessary for a person who's in good health. However, it could be something one wants to create, even though you're in good health, because of the conditions that I mentioned before that could come on you suddenly and that you don't anticipate. So it's not a bad idea. Don't think it's as critical, however, as the living will and the durable power of attorney. Let's go to the next slide. Post is definitely something that's available for people who are, right near the end of life. And you fill it out, you have your doctor sign it, and it's definitely a good thing. But again, not nearly as important as a living will and the durable power of attorney. And most of us who are healthy now don't need to worry about filling out a post. Provider orders for life-sustaining treatment. Yeah. Next slide. And one of the things that that is remarkable is that people who are well prepared for a good death often live longer and have better lives than people who aren't. It gives peace of mind to people. Whenever we accept people into our guide program in Final Exit Network, they tell us that they feel so relieved. Now they don't have to worry about suffering and dying a horrible death and dragging their loved ones into that process, and a great sense of relief. And I've just been amazed. I was a guide for some years, and I've actually been with people who ended their lives using the helium inert gas method. And I've been amazed every time I show up at their door on the day that they have chosen to die. They are glad to see us. We always work in pairs, and they welcome us in, and we talk for a while, and it's just amazing. It's amazing. It's been amazing to me at the determination of these people and their cheerfulness in the face of ending their lives. But I have to think, well, it just means that how much they're suffering and have been suffering. And I've never suffered that way. So it's hard for me to enter into it, but I can kind of understand, where they're coming from. And they're just so glad. We're like an angel of death for them. Let's go to the next slide. This is something you get if you become a member of Final Exit Network as a matter of course. It's free at the U.S. Living Will Registry. It's an online secured database, and it'll store your advance directive. If you have organ donor information, living will, durable power of attorney. And the great thing about it is it can be easily accessed by you or any healthcare provider throughout the United States. And this is very convenient for people who travel. We used to advise people to carry their living will, their durable power, so on and so forth, with them as they travel, which is, kind of inconvenient. And if you become a member of the Living Will Registry, you don't have to worry about any of that. If you were to be somehow incapacitated in, I don't know, Iowa, they would just call up your Living Will Registry. You carry a little card with you, and they can show them that, or your durable power of attorney can do that, and then you're good to go. So it's a great thing. It's a great benefit. I think it costs $50 if you are not a member of Final Exit Network. And come to think of it, that's what our basic membership fee is, $50 per year. However, you can become a member of Final Exit Network by less than that, just a very nominal amount. And by the way, we serve people who are not members of Final Exit Network. You don't have to be a member of our organization in order to be served by us. This is a billboard we put up many years ago when I was president, as a matter of fact. And I think that one might have been in Miami. We had one in San Francisco. We had them in various places, trying to make ourselves known. We think we're fairly well known. We've got a website. You know, we have a newsletter. We try to publicize ourselves, and so we think, well, people surely they must know about it. But it's amazing how few people do know about us. And so we try to make ourselves as visible as we possibly can. Some people think that, you know, we're some kind of underground organization and you know, dodgy or something. We're not. We're careful. As I said before, we're careful because a person can be locked up if the authorities find out that they intend to end their lives. And they don't want that to happen, and acting on their behalf, we don't want that to happen. So we're careful, you know. This is a screenshot of our website, finalexitnetwork.org. You can see that there's got various tabs there you could click on, find out about our services, our partners, find out about us. Everything that I've gone over today, practically everything I've gone over today, except anything that's been very philosophical, will be on the website. So it's a great resource. We can go to the next slide now. I sent Michael this brochure, and I'm hoping it can be circulated. Talks about our mission. I think maybe our vision statement is on there. This is also up on the website, which you can access. Next slide. A lot of people, a lot of organizations are active here. Death with Dignity, California. Death with Dignity is a national organization also. I think they are headquartered in Oregon, I think in Portland. The AARP, you can go on their website and you can get the forms you might want, the living will, power of attorney, living will, and so on. You can get that there. You can get the Post online, practically anything you want, you can get online. And these are just a few of the useful links. I do need to mention an organization I just recently found out about that I've become a volunteer for. And that is an organization called End of Life Choices California, EOLCC, I think, or EOLCCA. I don't have them up there because I didn't know about them when I created that slide. They are specifically devoted and only devoted to giving folks in California information about the California law and how to access the California law, how to find doctors willing to prescribe the medications that are authorized under the California law. So anything having to do with the California law, they're working with people about. And like I say, I just recently learned about them. I've become a volunteer for them, and I'm learning the ropes of their organization. Probably in 6 months, I would be able to say more about them than I can say now. But they're a grassroots organization started by a group of women that were concerned that a lot of people don't even know about the California law. A lot of doctors in California don't even know about the California law. I have a doctor friend here in Fresno who told me that he frequently comes across doctors who tell their patients, oh, well, you'll have to go to Oregon to get medical aid in dying. And no, since 2015, California has had an Oregon style law. I think it actually went into full effect in 2016, but we've had it for going on 5 years now, and it's still not as well known as you might think it would be. Signed by Governor Brown. Many of you probably know that. I don't know that we have another slide. I think we're out of slides. So we got a few questions as we went along, but there must be more.
No, but they're worth contemplating. And what's going to happen is we are going to record this meeting and have it placed on YouTube so people will be able to look at the presentation at their leisure. And at that point, they can ask you questions. And what I'll do is I will somehow, somewhere, list your email address so that they can reach out to you with their questions. Again, thank you, Dr. Stephenson, for your presentation today. And one final thank you to the members of the Lifelong Learners of the Central Coast for your support throughout the year. We wish you, on behalf of the board, a Merry Christmas and a happier 2021. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you once again.